I'm going to beg your forgiveness just a little bit as I continue not to be able to shake whatever cold this is. It's dropped my voice even lower than it normally is. I sound like an old Volkswagen, but I figure it's serviceable. And I didn't want to miss out on an opportunity to speak to a couple of friends and very special guests. I've got Tom and Cecil from Cognitive Dissonance. Gentlemen, and I'm using the word gentlemen, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much, Seth.
Than's so much for having us.
You're the only person in the industry that calls us gentlemen, so we'll take it. We'll take it when we can get it, man.
Not warranted, but we'll take it.
Yeah.
These are the guys who, if you're not familiar with who they are, these are the guys who, when people call and sign off on a phone call, will not say goodbye. They say glory hole. I had to have this explained to me. Not what a glory hole is, but why someone would finish a conversation.
He definitely knew what a glory hole was.
he already knew what the glory hole was.
No, I didn't need any explanation
Was
there.
was that a confession? I don't think that was a confession. I think that was
very familiar.
It's a great story because a fella who came on our who was calling into our show. You remember, well, I don't know if a lot of people remember Rush Limbaugh and his legacy of hate, but Rush Limbaugh used to have a show when he was alive, and he had a show that was essentially right-wing show where people would call in and they'd say at the end of the call or at the beginning of the call, they would say ditto. Ditto, the last guy said you're amazing. I'm just saying ditto as a way to say you're also amazing and to get on with my point. And this guy said, you guys should do glory hole instead. And he made it a thing.
He did. He made it
on
happen.
his own. And then we named our company after them.
His legacy lives on. He had no idea.
Lives on.
In
He
that
might not even
moment.
listen to the show anymore, but he influenced us far beyond that individual phone call.
Now, when I reach into my wallet to pay for something for this show, I have a credit card that says Glory Hole Studios.
Wow.
And nothing gives me a greater pleasure than handing that to some unsuspecting store clerk.
A lot of explanation has
Some
to
little
happen.
blue-haired church lady at the bank's going, glory.
That's it. Seth, when we opened our business banking account, there was this woman who she had a call. I'll never forget it. I'm there with Cecil. We're at the bank. This woman has to call into her corporate office, and she's got to give the details for this, business account that's being opened. And she said, so the name of the company is Glory Hole Studios. Glory Hole. Glory Hole.
And then she had to split it into two words where she's like, glory hole. It was like literally 10 minutes on the phone trying to explain it to somebody. It was amazing.
Awesome.
Genuinely
it was great.
outstanding.
It was great.
Does anyone see the word glory and somehow think it's a religious? You guys are a church or something?
Funny enough, one of the things that happened too was when we were renting places, someone asked us, they said, are you guys a church? And we said, kinda.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Then when I ordered checks to pay our rent for our first studio, Glory Hole Studios, and I had a cross on it because you could get like whatever kind of iconography. So I got a cross on it.
We want to be as blasphemous
It was
as possible.
delightful.
We
It was
really
delightful.
wanted to do that.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I've since formed two other small podcasting companies. So I've got Glory Hole Studios, Daddy Issues LLC, and Just the Tips Media. So
Yeah.
it's there's no reason for this.
This is why we can't have nice things. It's because of Tom and Cecil.
It's delightful.
So I know you guys have been doing a lot of politics lately. I know you've been talking a lot about the culture lately. You'll have to forgive me. I was just coming off a message I received from Twitter, which I still refuse to call X officially. Do you guys call it Twitter? I refuse.
Never.
I won't even call it.
I don't get a lot of hate mail, but I got this one guy, and I don't know what his deal is, but for months, it has been the most vitriolic, venomous, nasty stuff coming into
I'm sorry about that. I drink at night.
It wasn't Tom.
So
it wasn't Tom. And at some point, he started saying, you fracking Jew, Frackin. So I'm not Jewish that I know of. I don't think.
And are you engaged in the fracking industry?
Yeah,
Are you extracting oil from the oil sands, perhaps?
You dirty Jew, you fracking Jew, you Jew, you Jew. And I was like, well, this certainly qualifies as a slur, the way that he's using it, right? Using Jew as a pejorative, coming after me in that way. And so I went ahead and I don't pay attention to a lot of this stuff, but I went ahead and reported it and said, I think this qualifies as hate speech. And I get a message. In fact, I got it just before we started speaking from X. And it said, after reviewing the available information, we determined there were no violations of the X rules and the content that you reported.
You fracking Jew.
It's a sewer. Are you guys still
is so
there,
bad.
or have
No,
you just taken? Are you gone?
No, I bounced as soon as I was really the only one of the two of us that would ever go there. It was on my phone. So on occasion I would go with what is essentially our work account, Cognitive Dissonance, and I would post things, and I would on occasion read our mentions. Well, since it's changed, Seth, it's essentially been, we don't get tagged anymore because people know we're not there. So essentially all my mentions are just posts by Elon Musk. So I'll be notified. I'll have 15 mentions when I come back on. I'll click it and it will say, Elon Musk posted this. Elon Musk posted this. And I thought, well, I don't even follow Elon Musk. Why would that be on my thing? But he owns the company, so he sends them out essentially to everyone. And so that's my messages now. I don't bother logging in. I log in once in a great while. Now, when I log in, you are literally, I'm not kidding, on my feed the other day, I logged in. And on my feed, after I clicked the mentions, I rolled into my feed, and the fourth tweet down was a 9-minute white supremacy video about the Great Replacement Theory with slurs and everything. And I just thought, well, why on earth does this exist? I have no idea why people even go here anymore.
I've got a platform that I have cultivated for 14 years that I'm having a hard time pulling the plug on. But I think part of me thinks I'd like to go to Blue Sky.
Yeah.
I'm not, Threads to me is a bit sterile. It's okay. But I figure if it's going to be anything, it might be Blue Sky. I keep waiting for it to explode. I'll make a confession. And actually, Cecil, you teed me up perfectly. I used to think that Elon Musk was the real world Tony Stark, right? Before,
Did you really?
I used to think,
Good for you.
wow, this guy's behind the scenes and the Tesla. And I think the Tesla is a great car, and SpaceX did some cool stuff. And I used to have that thing where I thought, wow, this guy really is a genius. And then he spoke, right?
All he would do is open his mouth and betray it.
Then he spoke. I'm just going to open that can of worms. Elon Musk, talk to me about this guy. What's your take?
I don't think we ever really fell into the, where we thought Elon Musk was anything other than just like a rich guy who was, exploiting a bunch of people. That's really all I can think. I can't think of a time that I thought this guy is amazing. Even when he shot a car into space, I thought, well, that was a shitty, dumb thing to do. Can't you do something else with? Wouldn't that car do something else better somewhere else?
Space, just
be in
there.
space. It's just like a bad publicity stunt. He's always left a bad taste in my mouth, and he's always been kind of a guy that I've not really cared too much about. But I know a lot of people felt the same way you did.
I've always been lucky, I think, Seth, to be surrounded by people who are so much smarter than I am, who are able to auto-correct anything that I might get wrong before I almost even have time to get it wrong. I think there was a moment in time where I might have been tempted to be like, hey, maybe that guy is a good idea machine, right? And that moment in time was, do you remember when all those kids got trapped in that flooding cave?
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And Elon Musk was like, I'm going to have my engineers redirect their efforts to create this fucking AI submersible rescue bot or whatever. And I remember thinking, now that's cool. He's redirecting into this emergency moment. And then smarter people than me were like, one, nobody wants that. Experienced rescue people have said that's just going to get in the way. We don't have time for this. It's not proven. We're not using unproven stuff. This is all just publicity for this guy. And I was like, oh, that really sours that. That's a bummer. But I thought maybe his best intentions were there. Maybe he's just a best intentions guy, didn't really know the complexities of fucking spelunking rescue. Why would he? I don't know. And then I got to looking around and I'm like, oh, he's just a guy who got rich from emerald mines in South Africa from family wealth. And then he didn't invent literally anything. He didn't invent the Tesla. And then I looked into the Tesla, Seth, because I was going to buy one. And there's some of the most unreliable cars on the market. They're at the bottom of Consumer Reports and Car and Driver's least reliable vehicles. So I'm like, even that car is kind of a piece of shit. He didn't even invent it, and it's not good.
I'm struck by the colonization of Mars thing. I mean, someone explained this to me. He's got this obsession with how,
well, he's South African, so colonizing's kind of in the blood,
What a great line. What a great line. I think to myself,
Right,
with
the
the world
blood
filled
envelope
with
right there.
so much suffering, if you were to take the billions and billions and billions of dollars that he's putting into this idea that we know, because we're not going to freaking go live on Mars. We're not going to go and have a flourishing. It's crazy and stupid. And I've come to the point now where I really feel like being a billionaire I think it's probably immoral.
Yeah,
like
it's
you're
just
just
it
a
literally
horse.
can't be done.
You can't be an
morally.
ethical billionaire. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
If we're not going to spend a bunch of money to terraform Mars, we won't spend any money to fix our own climate here. Why would we bother doing anything anywhere else? We're not going to do that on another planet. Other thing that I think happened with Elon Musk is, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen when he bought Twitter. I'll be perfectly frank. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. My first thought was that he was just going to follow personal popular public opinion, because that's what he started out with, was a bunch of polls. Should I bring this person back? Let's have a big poll. And then people said, yeah, bring Trump back, bring back Alex Jones, bring back all these hate speech people. And he did. And then he started really falling into that shit posting, trash group of human beings who the only thing they can do is tear things down, and the only thing they can do is troll, and the only thing they can do is hate other people. And he fell in with that group, and now his entire life is just trying to get hearts and likes from that group. And so he's essentially, if he had any redeeming qualities before, they were flushed down the drain when he bought Twitter.
Yeah, his acquisition of Twitter cost him $44 billion. But it cost him much more than that, because to pay the $44 billion, he had to cash out a bunch of money from Tesla, which devalued the stock price of Tesla because he had to sell a bunch of those shares. Then he ended up overpaying. He mismanaged Twitter, turned it into X, devalued the stock of Twitter, then turned it into just a troll farm. And then he chased away he chased away an enormous revenue stream of, major advertisers. And I'm supposed to look at this guy and be like, genius.
Genius
That's a
businessman
genius.
right there.
Literally didn't do one thing right except for what he always wanted to do. And I think what he always wanted to do was to be a rich guy who owns the biggest bullhorn in the world. And there's nothing more powerful than that thing he bought. There's actually $44 billion doesn't begin to cover, I think, the real power value of something like Twitter. Cecil had mentioned every time you log in, you can't not be basically subscribed to Elon Musk. He has been able to purchase a kind of communicative power and a kind of communicative hegemony through his purchase or acquisition of Twitter that no dollar value could possibly reach how important that is. Looking at that guy as just a businessman is at this point reductive to the point of absurdity. He is now an oligarch.
To see someone who tells the advertisers to go fuck themselves and then gets pissed when they leave.
Tries to sue
When
him.
they fuck themselves? Yeah.
Tries to sue him. Yeah.
Yeah. We were over here fucking ourselves.
Bro, I was busy.
Well, I don't know what you want from me. I can't do both things.
Busy, man.
I got a handful of Kleenex, I got a handful of me. I don't know what you need. I can't type at the same time.
But we've got a private citizen now who can arbitrarily turn off Starlink satellites for Ukraine during military operations, right? And I think to myself, whoa, this kind of billionaire power is I don't know if it's unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen it utilized in this way, and it's tremendously terrifying to me.
I do think that it's unprecedented, and to add to that, it's not just Starlink turning off Ukraine's ability to prosecute their end of the war. Our own United States Department of Defense relies on SpaceX to launch our own military satellites. We aren't launching those with, it's not like the fucking Air Force
NASA or whatever,
is shooting up its own, rockets to launch our satellites. This has been outsourced now to one guy. A guy owns the company that the Department of Defense asks permission to shoot our fucking military satellites into the sky for. Again, this is a level of individual. The robber barons were paupers by comparison to the power, the kind of power, not just the financial power, but the types of power that a guy like Elon Musk has. We've never had anything like this. And it's terrifying because he's a young guy. All things considered, that's a young guy. And we're going to live with the consequences of this oligarch for a generation. And we got 20, 30, 40 years left of him deciding at a whim which nation states are allowed to defend themselves. That's wild.
The other thing, too, is that he's using Twitter as a way in which to get out a political message that only he approves of. I've seen so many different people say that essentially they're shadow banning stuff. They're making it so it's impossible to follow certain people. They'll take off the ability to follow certain people, like Kamala Harris HQ was complaining that a bunch of people couldn't follow them when they launched their Twitter because they essentially throttled the ability to follow them. He's been removing things that are popular from people's feeds that he doesn't agree with politically. So he's now inserting himself into the algorithm to make those decisions on what you see on his platform. You should just get off Twitter completely, because he's not just, like Tom suggests, doing things that are militarily, that people have to rely on him militarily. We're now relying on him for a large amount of communication that human beings do. And we have to trust that he's actually being honest. And we know he's not. We can see him not being honest.
I have two fantasies. One is that the alternate, whether it's blue sky or something else, will explode and become the alternative, or that Elon will get bored and sell it to somebody else who then restores the former Twitter brand. Right?
I think that's a fantasy, man. I think they're both fantasies.
You think we're hosed? Do you think
I think we're hosed.
We're stuck?
Look, I really do. And I don't mean to rain on your parade.
You just opened it up. Way to go, Seth. You just opened this up. I'm just going to sit back. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I do. I don't want to rain on your parade. But I think the intention for Elon Musk was never to buy Twitter in order to turn it into a profitable company. Twitter was already not profitable. Twitter was not operating in the black. So the intention to buy Twitter was to buy access to a kind of communicative power that he can control monopolistically. And so why in the world would he turn around and sell that? He didn't buy it at a time when Twitter was profitable. It was never a profit-making venture. I think it was an intention to own the means of communication, to control a certain kind of message in order to put his arms around a kind of power that nobody in all of history has ever had. Nobody's ever owned that by one person before. I think he is a guy who wants, because he said so, he wants to be a person of historical importance. This is a way for him to own a new kind of power that's never existed before as a person. So selling it seems crazy. I don't think he's ever going to sell something he never bought to turn around for profit. It already wasn't profitable, and then he overpaid for it. And maybe blue sky or something else will supplant it. But this is a place where he's created an echo chamber of millions, and they like the space he's created. We don't like it, but 74 million people voted for a guy I don't like. There's tens of millions, and across the world, hundreds of millions probably, of people who are perfectly satisfied in that space and will continue to play in that space.
Well, you're right, Cecil. I'm sorry I asked.
Maybe I'm wrong. What the fuck do I know, man? I don't know anything, but I don't think so. I really don't.
Just for future reference, just don't tune him up about social media. That's all I'm saying. If you wind that crank, it's going to go for a long time.
No, I will say, though, I have taken a probably an unhealthy amount of satisfaction watching the profit line on Truth Social continue to go down, literally just falling down into the abyss.
It's pretty beautiful, isn't it?
That's my hobby, is to refresh that every day and cackle.
I'm not on Truth Social for obvious reasons, but there are mirror accounts, I guess is what you would call them, that repost everything that he does on X or Twitter, Facebook, whatever. So, we see sort of these late night, all caps rantings, this unhinged word salad that he's known for. And it seems to be getting in a strong field of erratic post, things seem to be really, really getting crazy. I don't know if you've been watching the shit show. What are your thoughts?
When everything you have to say is all caps all the time, your headspace is no good, right? Yeah. If the only time you're speaking is to scream into the ether, I think things are not good.
We've been covering Donald Trump since he jumped on the scene with Sarah Palin's freshly cleaned hand after she cleaned off all the things, the bullet points she was going to write on it and talk about. She jumped on and endorsed him. And I remember Tom and I, we sat and we watched that entire endorsement for our show. And we hurt our jaw. We were laughing so hard. We thought it was amazing. We thought there's no way the American electorate would embrace this guy. He's a buffoon. He can't put a sentence together. He's a liar. There's nothing redeemable about him. And we were so wrong, so wrong. There's so many people out there that absolutely love Donald Trump. It's so funny to see. Sometimes you'll post a thing that's political on your Facebook, and I will see in the category in the comments, because, you know, being an atheist doesn't necessarily mean you're political one way or another. And I will see just the comments come in of vitriol towards you because you've decided to post something that's Kamala Harris positive. And I'm reminded that there's just so many people that are outside my own little circle that are very, very still rabid for Trump. And there's nothing that he can do or write, or these all caps screeds that he's posting, or these rambling rants that he makes. There's nothing that will dissuade those people from voting for him or thinking he's the best leader possible for this nation. It really just genuinely blows my mind. I don't think I've ever seen him state a policy that I could follow or that was even moderately intelligent. He's not a politician. What he does is he comes in and pretends he's in charge, and he's fooled a lot of people into thinking that he's in charge. And it's really starting to go down a cliff now, because after Joe stepped out, there's just nothing left for him to attack. And he's really just faltering right now. And I hope that this means something good for the election coming up.
Yeah, I think the wheels are coming off of the cognitive and intellectual bus, and they were barely secured in the first place on that particular vehicle. I think they're very evidently coming off. There's an intense amount of pressure for Trump to win the election to avoid going to jail. I think this is his only opportunity to avoid going to actual prison and being prosecuted for the many crimes, some of which he's already been convicted for, others which he's very clearly guilty of. The documents case is about as open and shut of a case as you can possibly have. Did you have the documents? Yeah, we got them from your bathroom, dude.
That one's been dismissed, though. So.
But it could be resurrected, I guess.
It could come back,
right?
But it has been dismissed as it stands.
I remember, though, Seth, in October of 2016. No, it had to be 2015. I was in QED, we'd gone to QED, and we were walking through.
That's a conference in Manchester, if you're unfamiliar.
Yep. So we're walking through, England, and we were talking to people, and I remember saying, "There's no way." They were worried. They were worried about Donald Trump getting elected. I said, "Look, America's better than that. We are not full of that many racists and idiots and misogynists. Look at the Access Hollywood thing. Like, look at the complete lack of coherency, the complete lack, the both sidesism that he speaks. When he says anything, he says both and all things at the same time. There's nothing coherent. There's nothing that's just here as a yes or no answer. It's all this gish gallop gibberish." And I'm like, America's not going to do this. So don't worry. I remember telling my friends from across the pond, do not worry. America's better than this. The thing that worries me about Donald Trump is Donald Trump, of course, but it's also all those people who, now I know you are there. Now I know you're either too cruel or too stupid to be a part of this country in a way that, like, I can respect. There's an exposure of some of the people in this country that's upsetting.
He's both symptom and cancer. He's like a black light at the crime scene. He's really exposed. I'm the same way. I was monumentally naive, and then I looked around and I thought, wow, all the people have come out of the shadows now, who feel empowered in their bigotry. What's that Mark Twain line? I've never wished a man dead, but I have read some obituaries with satisfaction.
with great glee, yes.
I do feel a bit of that. But, that takes me into some weird waters, and I want to get your perspective on this. We've had two, especially one, assassination attempt against Trump, with the bullet in the ear. And I'm not going to get into all the conspiracy theories, et cetera.
It's all trash.
Nonsense.
But what I saw from many of my fellow libs was just a few inches, just a few extra inches, and you'd have had him, right? Blow his freaking head off. We could have been done with the guy. And I go online and I say, wait a minute. We've spent all this time condemning arbitrary violence, and we don't support the assassination of political enemies, and we don't want anarchy, and we're promoting rule of law. And no matter how much we despise who he is and what he represents, we don't want to live in a world, we don't want to encourage a culture where we just decide we're going to take an AR-15 and blow the heads off of people that we despise. And the pushback I got from my fellow liberals was insane. Well, they made us this way. Well, we wouldn't feel this way if he wasn't so awful. It's they made me do it. And it's just such a weird space to be in. How I wish, honestly, if Skylab fell on him tomorrow, I'm okay with that. But I just don't want to see this culture of political violence as a solution. Do you want to speak to that at all, guys? You want to jump into these sort of complex and churning waters, if you would?
This is a hard place to be. And I want to start by saying, I empathize with all the people out there that feel victimized and could be in the future victimized by an administration of Donald Trump. I feel and empathize with you. I recognize that I'm sitting here as a white dude who probably, if Donald Trump got elected, would not see a ton of things change in my life. I'm a hetero guy. I'm cis. There's nothing in my life that might change because of that. So I understand and I recognize I'm speaking from a place of privilege. But I also think that there is genuinely nothing to be gained by us making these comments about, like, sort of gleefully talking about political violence in a way that makes it seem like we're happy if something like that happens. As soon as that happened, we talked about it. I think it was even the day of, or the next day, Tom and I had a conversation on our show that was essentially like, political violence is not the path. That's not good. We're in the same boat with you. We would read that obituary with great glee, but I don't want to see somebody shoot him. I don't want to see somebody turn him into a martyr. I want to see him lose, and I want to see him go to jail. That's what I want to see. That's how I want to see Donald Trump's legacy lay itself bare. And I don't think there's any room in there for political violence at all. And I don't think that shows. I mean, you may have gotten some people, I think, who might be afraid, who might be speaking out of turn, but I think that genuinely, I don't think that that's the pulse that I've taken from a lot of people. I haven't seen a lot of people who've said that sort of thing.
Yeah, I feel, so here's where I'm at with it. I think that I've got how I feel and what I think, and they don't align. And when those two things don't align, I have a responsibility to advocate for what I think and not to retreat into how I feel. There's also the question of, and I've heard it phrased like, well, what if somebody had assassinated Hitler, right? Like, would you say like we shouldn't solve that problem with political violence? And I am actually somewhat sympathetic to that idea, right? There are people now, I very clearly, as bad as Donald Trump is not Hitler. He has not ordered the extermination of 6 million Jews, and he has not invaded Poland. So like, it's also a bad analogy, and it's an unfair analogy. And it's an analogy that like we should be very, very, very cautious about using when we're talking about real violence, right? Not analogizing, but actually actionizing, right? Like turning into something that a bullet is involved with. When I say like there's how I feel and how I think, there is a base part of me that thinks like, I know I would not have sad feelings if that bullet had hit him. I would not have had sad feelings. I would have been like, probably would have felt relieved, if I'm going to be honest with you, to some degree. And that would have been the wrong way to feel. And I would have not entertained that as the right way to think. And I think that it's okay to have feelings that don't match our thoughts. And for us to say, all right, there's a part of me that is afraid. That part of me doesn't get to win. That part of me doesn't get to become an advocate. That part of me doesn't get to use its public voice. That part of me is wrong. It might be understandable, but it's wrong. And in those cases, I cede to the thinking part of me and say, all right, I do not want to live in a world where we decide who's in charge by a gunman's bullet. That's what I don't want.
I also think too, one of the things that happened right afterwards was there was a push by the Republican Party and by many Republican talking heads to try to shame everybody who had led up to the fact that led up to this assassination, when a bunch of people, including us, we've said it many times, that he's a threat to democracy. And he is a threat to democracy. There's nothing stopping us from saying that. But they tried to say that this comment that you keep making makes people want to take a shot at him. That's not true. First off, that's not true. The people who we've seen that have sort of been the ones that have acted out on this violence they don't feel like they're people that really are motivated by those things at all. One of them seems to be someone who is on the far right who looked like maybe he was looking for notoriety. We still don't understand the motives for the first one. And the second one is very muddied, and we don't understand really the purpose or motives for the second one either, for the second attempt. But genuinely, I will stop saying Donald Trump is a threat to democracy when Donald Trump stops being a threat to democracy. He's saying things like, just very recently, he said, what we need is a really violent day to get people in line, to get criminals in line. We need a violent day. We need essentially, he's calling for the purge. We have other moments where he's talking about being a dictator for a day. This is a man who has spent a lot of time cultivating this sort of fascist ideology that fits behind him. So genuinely, he is a threat to democracy, but I don't think it's a threat to democracy that should be ended with an assassin that takes him out.
No.
I think it should end at the ballot box, which I have my great hope that it will in a couple of weeks.
You don't preserve democracy by destroying what democracy systemically is built to accomplish. And an assassin's bullet does that. An assassin's bullet takes away the will of the people, which is what we are trying to preserve, and replaces it with the tyranny of an assassin. That can't be allowed to be a thing that happens. It just can't be. That being said, I was happy when he got COVID. Genuinely happy. I was thrilled. I came up in my memories the other day and I grinned when I saw it. I was happy when he got COVID. And I'm going to tell you, I hoped for the worst. I still hope for the worst naturally, because I think he's a threat. And I think that if he were no longer a threat from natural causes, the world would be better. That's different, though, than saying I think somebody should fucking murder that guy and we should not choose by democracy.
If we were to remove emotion from it and just think of it in terms of strategy, I mean, to have martyred that guy and then, we've got an entire culture of MAGAs primed for violence anyway. You assassinate the dear leader and all bets are off, right? It's war in the streets.
Yeah.
And I don't buy the excuse that, well, it would be war anyway. I don't
buy it either.
Yeah, it just makes me crazy. How a guy that unhealthy has lived this long really is pretty remarkable.
Thank you.
It really is a marvel of science. Maybe there is an intelligent designer after looking at that.
I am switching.
He created something that's fueled on hamburgers.
I was switching to a hamburger and Calviffe diet. And that's it. It's hamburgers and Calviffes. And that's all I'm doing from now on.
What a great segue. Since we're talking about food, and I know, Cecil, that you are a chef. So if I was to move to Springfield and prepare dog or cat.
Oh God.
Oh, no.
Sorry. I just had to do it. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. This is so unbelievably racist and xenophobic and offensive. And it just won't go away. I mean, no matter how many public officials in Ohio come forward and go, this is bullshit. It's unhelpful. You're endangering people. Stop saying it. The more they do that, the more that the Trump and Vance people tend to tee off on it. It's absolutely, I know you guys have been talking about this, right?
Yeah. Well, the other night, JD Vance said it on the stage at the VP debate. So he had said it. And then the only time CBS stepped in to actually fact check him, they said, that's not actually happening. And then he said, I thought you weren't going to fact check me. And then he got very upset about it. But genuinely, JD Vance, there's a religious component to this. We just did a show on JD Vance, a deep dive show, where we were talking about his connection to sort of a Christian evangelical Presbyterian group of YouTubers and people that are podcasters and things. And they have a very sort of specific worldview. And part of their worldview is very much a racist, white supremacist, great replacement theory worldview. And so these people that JD Vance is very close to and that he's been working with, these people are they have a very deep racist ideology, and the ideology is assimilate. And if you don't, we want to make sure that you don't live here and that we get rid of you because you need to assimilate to our religion and to our culture. And so JD Vance is really hooked up with that sort of whole group of people. And that's why he keeps saying that sentence and that idea over and over. I think Donald Trump sort of walked away from it a little, but JD Vance won't ever shut up about it.
And I think that the fact checking, Seth, I think the fact checking doesn't and cannot work among a certain group of people. And the reason is that one thing that I've discovered is true since 2015, distressingly true, is that truth is not an antidote to the repetition of ideas that confirm our biases. And the right has figured this out. And so what they've done is they have realized that they can say untrue things as long as the untrue things that they say confirm the biases of the people they're trying to motivate. It's true if you say untrue things about the economy, untrue things about immigration, untrue things about races of people, untrue things about women. They figured this out, that the repetition of ideas that confirm our biases are stronger than truth. Unfortunately, it wasn't always that way. And I think it wasn't always that way, not to go back to social media, because we couldn't repeat it as much. But now we can repeat and repeat and repeat. We can set that button to be a constant level of repetition so that eventually it just infects. Yeah. Eventually you see it so much that it becomes programmed into you, because the more we see something, the more we're likely to believe it through repetition. It hits us from two sides. And we really, because of the way we now intake information, we're in some ways helpless. And it's horrible. Truth is not the antidote.
JD Vance he's kind of an Amy Coney Barrett type in the fact that he's like he just associated with that pastor, Lance Wallnau of the Apostolic Reformation. I mean, that's all Seven Mountains mandate. And for those who don't know what the Seven Mountains are, Christianity wants to essentially overtake the culture on 7 fronts. And I made a note here: family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. And I think JD Vance is a true believer. Tom, Cecil, you guys think he's all in, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the great replacement theory fits itself perfectly inside of all of that, because it shows that you need to take back something that you've already lost. And they're trying to make it seem like they're losing something. So we need to fix that. We need to remedy that by taking it back. And so the great replacement theory, that white nationalist, racist, great replacement theory that can either be anti-Semitic or anti-immigrant, it fits pretty much anything you want. And they use that all the time.
Yeah. As far as whether JD Vance is a true believer, I don't know if he is or not. I don't even know that that's an important question. I don't mean to disrespect that, but what he's a true believer in is the tools that those other true believers provide him that give him access to what he wants, which is power. What we've seen from JD Vance is that he is willing at the drop of a hat to completely change all of his ideas and ideals, abandon them in a heartbeat if there is a jot of money or power to be gained from doing so. Literally a year and a half, 2 years ago, he was upfront and open and standing on his bullhorn talking about how Trump was the next Hitler. I mean, these are his words. Trump is the American Hitler. Now he is his fucking running mate. This is a guy who has biracial children. He has an Indian wife who is Hindu, and he is now in bed with dominionists. This guy doesn't really need to care. Everybody is a tool for him to use in order for him to gain access to the halls of power.
So if, according to the Twitter guy, then I am a fracking Jew and the Christians take over, I guess I'm online for deportation or something. I don't know. Since you talk a lot of politics, I have teed up some political questions. And as my voice is failing, I'm going to let you do more of the talking, obviously. Let's talk about the Electoral College. For those who don't understand, do you guys want me to lay it out? You want me to do it?
Well, I can lay it out. Essentially, we've decided that land has more votes than people. And so what we've done is we've allotted amount of votes per state. That's based on the House of Representative votes in that state. And those votes, a state will collect their popular vote. And then that amount of votes is normally cashed unless it's like 2 places on the map. I think it's Maine and Nebraska are the 2 places where they do split. You can have a fewer number of electoral votes than the whole thing. But essentially, mostly they just take the entire kitty of electoral votes, and whoever won the popular vote in that state gets that whole cache of electoral votes. And then we calculate all those up and we make a decision on who becomes president based on how many states they won, not by the popular vote, which makes more sense. And by the way, 2 Republicans have won by not winning the popular vote in the last, at this point, 25 years. That would be Bush when he ran against Gore, and Donald Trump did not win the popular vote in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. So the popular vote, most people in the country vote, and then we don't go with what they chose. Instead, we decided based on 5 or 6 states that are swing states.
To be fair, the Electoral College was put into place to prevent there being a handful of really powerful states which would decide the national election. And so by instituting the electoral vote, what we now have is a handful of really popular states with less people in them that now decide the entire election. So we've solved a problem by replacing it with the same problem, but stupider, because now it's less people. So now we have the same, literally the exact same problem, but we've made it dumber. And that's how we elect our leader of this country. There are 38, almost 39% of the votes in this country that are pledged based on the national popular vote contract.
Yeah.
Which would be a way out of this morass that would not require ratification by like 2/3 and all this nonsense.
Congressional amendment's not going to happen. It tried in the 70s or 60s or something, and then it just failed. An Electoral College one tried to go through, but it just didn't make it. So,
and for those that don't know, the national popular vote contract is basically where states enter into a multi-state contract where they say, whoever wins the popular vote's going to get all my electoral votes, regardless of what the people in my locality have voted for. 38% or so, 38.8, I think is what I saw the other day, of the electoral votes are pledged this way through a national popular vote contract. But very certainly, if it were actually to happen that way in a way that decided the election, our 6-3 Supreme Court would be like, that's not legal, and throw the whole thing.
Well,
so we've got the dumbest possible system.
Yeah. That 5 of the last Supreme Court, the 5 conservative Supreme Court justices appointed were appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and the Supreme Court gave George W. Bush the presidency that he lost. He lost that vote. He actually lost. He should have lost that vote electorally. Yeah. He lost Florida. Numerically, he did not win Florida. He should not have gotten Florida's electoral votes, but the Supreme Court was just like, it's taking too long. You can have it. And they gave it to him. And that's how we ended up with that clown.
And we let him.
Yeah. We ended up with a guy who turned into a war criminal and invaded a sovereign nation with no pretext because the Supreme Court was like,
Now, I found it was interesting, too, that Dick Cheney comes forward and he says, talk about a war criminal who comes forward and says, I'm going to vote Kamala. I'm like, well, when the Republicans have lost Dick Cheney.
Yes.
Right. And then W is like, I'm not going to get political.
W has washed his image. If you look now, I want to make no bones about it. W was our worst president that I ever lived through. I think Donald Trump was bad. Donald Trump was really bad. A second Donald Trump term could trump George W. Bush, but George W. Bush was an absolute horror of a president. He was awful in every way. And that guy has washed his image. He's like your funny uncle who paints now.
Yeah. And this is a guy who, through his presidency, laid the necessary legal and intellectual groundwork for the unitary executive theory that has pushed an unprecedented amount of power into the executive branch, stripped Americans of an enormous amount of our rights through the Patriot Act, rights that we have decided legally we will never regain ever again. He invaded countries that had nothing to do with literally anything at all. Hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians murdered in that invasion of Iraq that accomplished nothing and never had any rational pretext. And he knew it at the time. He knew it. He was not fooled. He knew it. We know that. So like genuinely, all the shit that we're dealing with now is the result of those first 25 dominoes that his administration knocked over. And we're somehow like, but he's adorable.
Look at him. He painted a flower.
Yeah. Remember when we were having real-time arguments about how much torture? We were having real-time arguments.
Yeah, we were arguing whether or not drowning someone was actually torture.
Well, they didn't drown all the way.
I mean, they kind of half drowned them. Yeah.
We made them think they were drowning by feeling exactly like drowning.
Pretty much exactly like drowning.
Yeah, literally everybody succumbs to it.
We weren't sure. And also keeping people indefinitely.
We still have
those people.
We don't know what to do now.
So, the guy's a horror. And I don't care what he paints.
Yeah.
Do you have optimism about November? I mean, I'm not superstitious, but Natalie and I are like, don't jinx it.
I think right now we are looking at a surge from her that I have not seen behind a candidate since Obama. So Obama came on the scene. He was somebody who, it blew everybody away how popular he was and how much push he had. Her first couple of weeks and leading into now, there are people who are behind her in a way that I haven't seen from Obama. So I am fingers crossed thinking there's a good chance that she can win this election coming up. I also see Donald Trump feels like he's sort of quiet quitting in a lot of ways. He's not taking advantage of some of the things that he could take advantage of to get himself out there. Free publicity on certain places like 60 Minutes and other places. He's not taking advantage of that. He's backing away from those things. He's backing away from another debate with her where he could again solidify more votes if he were more powerful on that stage. And I think he's just quiet quitting this and walking away. Fingers crossed that's enough for his followers to also quiet quit him.
More important than my prognostications would be the recognition that the most powerful voting bloc in this country, and it is not even close, is millennials and Gen Z. They have all of the political power right now. Demographically, numerically, it's not even close. Millennials and Gen Z will decide this election. They'll either decide it through participation or non-participation, but they will decide this election. The most important thing to do is to recognize that numerical demographic reality. We, I think, a lot of times fall into a really lazy and numerically dishonest trap of saying, well, the boomers are the ones who decide. The boomers are in control. The boomers are going to make if you cede control to the boomers, it is because we didn't show up. It is because we chose to disengage from a process and hand our political power, which we have, I'm Gen X, but I don't count, which we have, right? Because the millennials, there's way more. It's not even close. Like Gen Z, there's way more. It's not even close. You add those two together, that's where the political power is in this country. It's not me. It's not my dad. Those guys are going. We really need to recognize that is the numerical demographic reality of this country. And those folks need to see their power and demand their power. And the way to do that is to show up at the voting booth in ways that they've never done before. If they do that, this is not a close election. If they do that, then the things that the millennials and Gen Z want to have happen have to start happening because people will pay attention to the people who vote. They will pay attention to people who exercise their power. Nobody pays attention to people that refuse to exercise their power. They've decided to be politically unimportant. So more than my prognostication, Seth, What really matters is whether or not millennials and Gen Z see their own power and make decisions based on that truth.
I can't think of a better place to wrap it up. How do people find you and your work, guys? Just pitch your stuff.
Real easy. You could find us at dissonancepod.com. You can find the podcast there, and then links to all our other shows. I do a show on the side with a lawyer friend of mine who happens to be religious. It's a show called Lawful Assembly. Tom has other projects, and we are also both involved in another show called Citation Needed with the Scathing Atheist guys. We do a show every week on a funny Wikipedia topic, and Tom has a couple of shows.
I've got a parenting show called Dear Old Dads, which I do with Thomas Smith and Eli Bosnick. It's a parenting and relationship show, and it's a blast. So
I love it. I'll put links in the description box. I'm going to go and grab a bottle of NyQuil and totally milk it with my wife. You know, she's totally on to me, but she puts up with it like, baby, would you get me some hot soup? You know, those types of things. Total man thing, I guess. So I'm going to go and play that card. You two were just a joy. Maybe I'll get a chance to come to Chicago. We can hang out.
We'd
love it, Seth. We'd love to have you. And after the election, we should talk and either celebrate or cry on each other's shoulder.
We'll take you to the glory hole, man.
I was going to ask how well fortified the Glory Hole studio was. If we need to establish our own country, maybe, you know, the sovereign nation of Glory Hole. And I'd like to see that bank account open for sure.
You don't want to see our flagpole.
All right. Tom and Cecil, Cognitive Dissonance. Love you guys. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much, man.
Appreciate it.